Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to, in this video, we are going to continue our look at complex numbers. And this is the last lesson 9 here in module 3, where we're talking about quadratics. So we saw that in solving equations sometimes we ended up with this strange situation where we were trying to take the square root of a negative number. And it's strange because what does that mean, right? When you take the square root of -1, right, what does that really equal? Because if we do 1 squared, which is 1 times 1, well, that's equal to 1, right? And if we do -1 squared, that's equal to -1 times -1, which is still positive 1. So how do we get two numbers that are the same, right? A number that you multiply by itself, right? It gives you that -1 there. What squared? What, when you square it, gives you -1, right? It's the same thing as asking the square root of -1, is what kind of thing. It's a hard question, right? And in fact, we mathematicians had to come up with a new number, the number I, that represents the square root of -1, okay? Which allowed them then to do all sorts of computations and stuff like that with their imaginary numbers. So here we're going to do some arithmetic with complex numbers. Remember that a complex number has both a real part and an imaginary part. So in this first number here, the 3 is real, the 4i is the imaginary part, and together it's complex. Okay. Here in the next number, 7 is the real part, and -20i is the imaginary part, and together it makes a complex number. And we're just going to add these things together here. So take a look at this problem and think about, if you had to, right, if without me to guide you here, what would you do? What parts would you add together here? Would you add all these numbers together? Would you add only certain numbers together? Kind of thing. What would you do? So it turns out, right, that when we add, we're basically just going to combine like terms. So real with real, so 3 plus 7, so it's going to be 10. In fact, maybe I'll do it even more explicit. So 3 plus 7, we'll group those two together, plus, and it's going to be the 4i minus the 20i. Like so. And so then we'll end up with 10 minus 16i, or plus -16i if you like. Either one is fine. Okay, we can't combine the 10 and the 16 because they are not like, right? The 10 doesn't have an I. The 10 is real. The -16 is imaginary. Okay, so let's keep looking. We can also, of course, subtract. Now, in this case, I would really encourage you to, since that subtraction sign is in front of parentheses like this, that we actually would distribute the subtraction sign. So let's make this add, and then we'll make this a -7 and a positive 20i, which now when we combine 3 and the -7, that makes -4. And then the 4i and the positive 20i there would become then 24i. Okay, and again, we got those numbers because we took this minus sign. Since it's in front of parentheses, right, we can distribute it. So make it plus and then -7 and a positive 20i. All right. We can also multiply complex numbers too. Okay, and this is just like if you would multiply like x plus 2 times x plus 3 or something like that, right, where we'd FOIL. Right, same kind of situation here. We would get x squared plus 3x plus 2x plus 6. Well, same thing here. So it's going to be 1 times 1, which is 1. 1 times -2i, which is -2i. Positive 2i times 1, so plus 2i. And positive 2i times -2i. So this might be a little bit trickier here, but 2 times -2 is -4, right? And an I times an I, well, when you multiply something by itself, that's just that something squared. So it's I squared. All right, now let's combine like terms here. So -2 plus 2, those are going to cancel, right? They give you 0. And we'll be left with 1 minus 4i squared. And you might think that we could stop here and say, okay, that's a good enough answer. But we can actually do a little bit better because we can actually simplify I squared more. Remember, what does I equal? I equals the square root of -1. So then, if that's the case, what would I squared equal? Well, we have an equation right here, right? If I square this side and I square this side, this will result in exactly I squared. What happens when you square a square root? They cancel, and we're left with negative 1. So I squared is negative 1. So we'll make this 1 minus 4 times negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 4 is positive 4, and so we end up with 5 as our final answer. So we start with something that's complex, right? It's got imaginary stuff in it. And then by simplifying and multiplying and simplifying, we end up with just a totally real answer. No more imaginary stuff at all. Fascinating, huh? Okay. So number 4 here, and we'll stop after this, I think. Oh, actually, that is the end. Okay, so example 4, we'll just power through here. So example 4 asks us to multiply the complex numbers again, but this says to verify that these are solutions to x squared plus 2x plus 5. You know what? I'm going to stop here, and we'll go ahead and do that in the next video.